Hey everybody, thank you for attending. This is the Geopointe Administration Deep Dive webinar. So this is a bit of an advanced topic regarding Geopointe and gets into more of the details of what's going on behind the scenes, how to get Geopointe set up, those kinds of things. We're here to answer your questions too. So if you do have questions, please post them into the GoToWebinar and we'll get to those at the end. So definitely want to make sure we are educating you throughout this entire webinar process. And there's where you put the questions. So GoToWebinar has a control panel, and you can throw your questions there. We are recording this, so after the webinar, you can expect to receive this presentation as well as a recording. The presentation has, you'll notice some of the slides are a little wordy. A lot of that isn't for the purposes of right now. It's for the purposes of sending you the materials afterwards so that you have access to all the links and such. There's some other webinars going on. So we're trying to do more and more with webinars. We do a weekly Geopointe overview webinar, which is more about an intro to the functionality of the product itself from the end user standpoint. We have now 3 topical webinars, including this one. An analytics deep dive goes deep into our analytics offering. And we're doing another one on July 30th, but we have recording available. For the first time, we're doing a developer-focused one. We have some pretty advanced things you can do with Geopointe and how it ties into Apex and Visualforce and different things like that. I guess it would be advanced administration plus developer type of webinar. And that's coming in August. We will have a recording once that's complete that you'll always be able to view. And then there's this webinar we're doing right now. So Geopointe is the premier mapping solution for Salesforce. You should be pretty familiar with it already. This webinar really assumes you have some familiarity with Geopointe. We're not going completely into the basics on how it works, other than the administration side. We're kind of starting with the basics there. We build upon the best platforms out there. So Salesforce is really where Geopointe runs. And then we work and communicate with various mapping providers, Google being the main one that users see. And there's some other ones going on there as well. Something that doesn't come across in webinars, but hopefully you get out of just the way we operate and work with you. Our reviews on AppExchange are further evidence of this. It's just our commitment to customer success. And our AppExchange reviews are a testament to that, and as well as just how we work with you. And webinars like this that try to educate you on some of the more nuanced topics of Geopointe are our way of doing that. And so hopefully you see that as well. And we're in it just as much for this reason as we are for building a great product we enjoy building and love using, and enjoy getting out there, really making you successful, solving your business problems is really what it's all about. And so, hopefully that comes across to you. So we'll go through a bunch of things today, but there's some other ways to get help in the application you should know about. So in the application itself, there's some help links. Sometimes there's a little orange circle you can hover over and get some info or links to learn more about. On the map itself is a little help item that you can click on and get a bunch more links. But just so you know that those are there, and look for those and use those and tell your users about those. We do have a help center. That's where all our support documentation is. Our ideas site is a great way to give us feedback on things and share that with the community so that others can comment on it and vote on it. You can always ask us questions via our support channels. And then you're probably already on the mailing list because you probably signed up for this webinar through an email that we sent out. But if you're not, or if colleagues aren't, you can have them sign up for our email list. And we keep emails to a minimum. It's really the important things, especially around release timeframes, and then usually a catch-up email on content in between our major releases. Geopointe is available on the AppExchange. Today's hands-on portion of the webinar is going to really start after we've installed Geopointe. So a couple slides here to intro. Geopointe's on the AppExchange. This is where you get the application. From here, you have access to some critical links, such as how to install, what to do after you install, through the Details tab. This is where you read reviews. You can access a demo page to learn more about features and see videos and such. Test drive the system. So if you want to bounce into a sample database, this is where you do it. And of course, this is where you install Geopointe through the regular AppExchange process. Installation is very straightforward. There's not much you have to do that's special because you're installing Geopointe, you really just click Get It Now from the AppExchange and follow the path through there. This can go into production or a sandbox, and we offer free trials. No limit to how many users you want to assign, and it's for 15 days by default. The post-installation steps, this is where we'll start to kick off things, is really what to do once you have it installed. And so this really walks you through, I like to think of it as getting the wiring in place, make the connections between Geopointe and your Salesforce system to make it usable for people. Okay, this is just a screenshot of what the post-installation steps look like when you get to our website and go through them. And we'll go through pretty much all the steps today. So when you're getting set up, it really all starts with map objects. This is how you define a Salesforce object for mapping. Salesforce systems come in all different flavors. Some people are using an OEM version of Salesforce specific to their industry. Others are using the out-of-the-box, so to speak, Sales Cloud or Service Cloud, Marketing Cloud. Others are more platform nature in Salesforce. And so there's different objects going on all the time. Not everybody uses the same objects. And so this map objects are how you tell Geopointe what matters for mapping. All objects are created equal in the application's eyes. So whether it's a custom object you have, maybe you're in real estate and you want a properties object or you have one, or whether you're using the most popular one, which is accounts, map objects are how you define that, and functionality is the same. It's easy setup for any object, and we'll go through that in just a few minutes. We have a little bit easier for some known objects such as leads, accounts, and contacts, and so on. But we have documentation, and it's pretty straightforward to begin with for setting up a new custom object or setting up the check-ins object, which is the Geopointe feature. When you're setting up a map object, there's really two approaches to setting it up, and we'll go through both of these in a moment. One is what we call fully defined, and that's really where you're going to say, this is the object, and this is where all the address information resides. It's really what you would think of, how you might want to set it up, tell Geopointe about the object. Referencing is a little easier. This is something where opportunities being a really good example, you are referring to another object setup. So you want to make opportunities mappable, but you already set up accounts. You don't want to have to reprocess opportunities because you already know the location of all the accounts. You just refer to the account object this way. And we'll go through these two examples in a minute. So Geopointe can optionally read your latitude and longitude fields. 98% of map objects just use address fields. Some of our customers have their own coordinates, whether they're tracking things at specific locations that don't have addresses, maybe like an agricultural plot of land or a cell tower, or whether they are using some sort of address tool and have this information already to have the exact coordinates. We can read those as input if that's what you have. The Geopointe batch size, the geocoding batch size, and I'll get more into geocoding, is configurable object by object. So by default, when you set up an object to be mapped, we're going to process 100 records at a time. We do many batches of 100, but each process is going to do 100 records, and 100 at a time. If you have development in-house, maybe triggers you built and such, and you haven't done it in such a way that it can handle getting updates to 100 records at once, we have the ability for you to configure that. So it helps you bring that number down to stick within any and avoid any conflicts you might have with another app that hasn't written their triggers properly, or a code you have that for whatever reason isn't able to support a batch that size. It's very, very rare, but you can put a filter at the object level. We have filtering I'll be showing you later at more the user level, the reporting level. At the object level, you can do this system-wide for an object. So the best example we've had is we've had customers that they buy lead lists and have tons of data in their leads tab, but really there's a small segment of that actually matters, that have gone through some qualification process to even know if they're viable leads to start working with. You can put a filter at the object level, and it'll just work system-wide. Whether you're querying the data, whether you're geocoding the data, it makes Geopointe think you have less data there than anything else. It uses Salesforce's SOCL syntax And because it's so rarely used, we don't have a UI for you to build the filters for this specific type of filter. We can help you if you don't know the syntax. But again, it's very, very rare that you'd be using it. But it's there. All right, and then the geocoder is going to look to the map objects to know what to process. So that's basically what's mappable. Okay, so let's jump into the demo here. I am at the point where I've just installed Geopointe. I just got the email from Salesforce saying the install finished. I now want to go into Geopointe and begin the setup process. Okay, so we're going to kind of bounce between slides and demo here while we get things set up. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find Geopointe. So in the apps list, Geopointe is there. And this is where I'll be able to see all the tabs related to it. So really everything starting with this map tab on over is what Geopointe has. We included some of the common CRM tabs with it. Any of these tabs can be moved to where you normally work within Salesforce or where your users work. And we'll get into the tabs and things and who should see what. But this is just an easy way to get started and access things. But we're going to get some objects set up for mapping. We're going to get accounts and opportunities set up. And all that setup begins at the Geopointe Setup tab. So I'm going to click that. And it brings me to our setup page. Okay, I can see I'm in a trial here. I can see on the right-hand side, when we're looking to expire and so on. The front page here is just very basic information. We would love to have your contact information so we know who to reach out to, things like that. It's pretty, I don't have to demo it. It's pretty obvious when you go through it. And there's some basic preferences here. But map objects are how we get an object set up. So in this system, our users need to map accounts and they need to map opportunities. So to get started, I'm going to click New Map Object. My first choice is going to be a list of objects that I want to map. Okay, these are the objects in my Salesforce system. And I could choose any of them. I'm going to choose Account. Okay, we know a little bit about accounts. Accounts are very common within Salesforce. So we've pre-defaulted some things for you for the most common configuration. And that is these fields right here. If you're mapping your own object, you would have to choose what these fields are. And so what we're looking at here is first we're on the setup type of defining this map object. This is the fully defined map object I was referring to in the slides. I specify a field to represent the name of the object. This is what I'll see or what users will see when they map things as kind of like the title. And here we've defaulted it to the account name. Likewise, we're identifying the 5 address components: street, city, state, postcode, and country. Salesforce breaks out those fields with an address. We need you to as well. It makes geocoding most accurate. We default the billing address in for accounts. You can always change it. Or to set any field, you click the change link here. You will have a list of the fields you have access to. Choosing the, let's say we were going to work with the shipping address. It's just a matter of choosing the shipping address and selecting it, and it'll get chosen here. I'm going to switch it back though. So once I've gone through the process of picking my address fields, most commonly, that's it. I just hit save. Some other things on the screen, these latitude, longitude fields here, these are on the right-hand side. These are for the purposes of telling Geopointe about latitude, longitudes you want to supply the system. So this is not where we output data. This is where you would be, if you have the data, which is not common, where you would tell Geopointe about that. The way the logic works in Geopointe is on a record-by-record basis. If a record has those fields populated, it'll use that location. If not, it will revert back to the address. And there's some other options here as well, such as the batch size I spoke of. It's best just to leave it at 100, but you can dial it down if you want to. Query limit gets into things where how many records people should be able to map. This is going to be changing a little bit in our next release because we're advancing how much data can get to the map. But auto is the safest. Basically, it has the system be aware of Salesforce limits and things, which there are, and just be as smart as possible about querying. And then down here is the filter I spoke about earlier. You'll notice this field right here. It's called the Geocode field. When we get into geocoding, I'll tell you a little bit more about this. But there's a field on every object that's mapped in Geopointe that points to our Geocode object. So an account will have a lookup field called Geocode that points to its Geocode record. Every object needs it. We've supplied this field on a number of objects, such as the accounts and leads and contacts and so on. On custom objects, you create one. Now I just hit save. So actually up at the top of the screen, there was a choice for geocoding this data right away. It's turned on by default. So actually right now, all of my accounts are being processed for geocoding. We also said we wanted to do opportunities. So let's do it again. This one's going to be set up a little differently. I'm going to choose opportunities off the list here. And in this case, we're going to use another map objects configuration. Because it chose opportunities and because we already have accounts set up, the system was smart to kind of default you in this setup. But here I'm going to specify what the name field is. That's still important. So when I map an opportunity, what do I want to see? I want to see the opportunity name. Beyond that, I can specify what object I'm referring to. So this opportunities look up to accounts. So I want to use the account. What field off the opportunities should be used to look for the account, and we'll use the standard field that's defaulted here. Hit save. So at this point, we're making the data mappable in Salesforce. Okay, I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but if I come over to batch jobs, you'll see, here's this Geocode batch job that just ran. And that was against the accounts object. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about geocoding. So geocoding is our process, or the process, for interpreting the address data and turning it into coordinates. All right. So by configuring accounts, pointing to the billing address, that gives Geopointe enough information to do that, to run that process. It's a schedulable background process. So far we haven't scheduled it, but we have kicked it off as a one-time operation against accounts. So I'll show you how to schedule it in a second. It is international, so we do worldwide coverage, and it's a background process. It'll do like 1,200 records a minute. And so right now it ran through that. And then ongoing, once we schedule it, the scheduler will only be looking at changes to records. So new records, changes to the address of existing records, and that's what it'll process. So some options for geocoding. The easy button is to go to the Geopointe Setup page and click the Schedule Job button. Okay, that's going to set up a geocoding job to run hourly. And that's as often as a Salesforce job allows it to be scheduled. Okay, that's what 95% plus of customers do. There are some other options though if you prefer. So the second bullet here is more about scheduling it yourself. Some of our customers use batch jobs in Salesforce quite a bit, have a lot of logic running, maybe integrations with other systems and so forth. Salesforce has limits on how many jobs can run at the same time. And if they do geocoding hourly, it's too often. And so they have the ability to schedule it themselves. So rather than using the easy button, they would go into the Salesforce screens and schedule an Apex job. And we have a document that talks you through this. And this is where you can schedule a daily job. You can specify the time. If you want it to run multiple times a day, you create multiple jobs at different times and do that. But it gives you nice flexible options. Some customers, after they've run through everything once, just want it to run nightly. On demand, you can always go to the Geopointe Setup page and run it on demand. For every map object, there's a couple links there that can launch the batch job. And you can either launch that to rerun everything, so it'll reevaluate every address for that type of data, or the delta, or the changes, which is what the schedule job does. So it would only look at the updates to data. For you developers out there are ways to geocode specific records or launch the job for specific objects. So if you wanted to programmatically kick off an account job because you're doing a data load of accounts on a nightly basis, at the end of that, if you want to have your programming kick off the job to run geocoding on those accounts, there's a line of code you can do that. Same thing on a record by record basis. Maybe leads are coming in off your website and you don't want to wait that hour. So in code, you could geocode that specific record. We have some customers using this for things like automated lead assignment. Lead comes in off the web, they geocode the record immediately and utilize the fact that it was geocoded to trigger geography-based assignment rules. The geocode results are on the geocode record itself. So I mentioned that, say, the accounts would have a field that points to the geocode record. There's lots of data on that geocode record that's useful for you. And so the core of it is latitude and longitude and quality. That's really what you need to make things mappable. you will get some other byproducts of the process. So you will get a quote-unquote clean address. And so in the case of a good geocode where it found the right property, the right rooftop, you'll get things like a standardized street value. In the US, you'll get zip and the four-digit extension to that. You'll get the county information and that sort of thing. Now, there are different quality levels of geocodes. So the geocoder is somewhat forgiving. If you have a full address, what you should be getting as a result are either point or address. Intersection is possible too, if you said like, Park and Fourth or something like that. But most common, it's point and address. They're almost the same. Point has been extra verified against a US Postal Service database to ensure that it's the right address. But address is very, very, very good too. That's what you should be getting with a full address. In some cases, you might have street, and what that means, it's good. It pretty much means that it found the right area, the right block, but it couldn't pinpoint the exact property. All right. Some other ones that might be sufficient is city and zip. What this is referring to is based upon the address provided, it could only get as good as the zip code or postal code or as the city. A great example of this is if you have a PO box, you'll probably have a geocode at the zip level, and that means that the pin placement will be at the center of the zip code level, which is fine usually for reporting, not so great for routing. Okay, so it's being aware of those qualities. And pretty bad quality would be just to the state or country level, and those are rare if you have a full address. Okay, so some tips on geocoding. Actually, let me just jump over to get off slides for a second and show you how to kick things off. So now that we've set up these objects, the easy button that I was talking about is just coming over to the batch jobs here and clicking the schedule jobs button. Okay, and as you'll see here, this has queued up a job, so hourly it's going to run. I click it, I forget it, and I don't have to worry about it anymore. All right. If I come to an account record, and actually I never added the geocode field. You don't have to, but I'm just going to do it so I can show you. Add the geocode field. This is how I could navigate to the geocode for a specific record. Okay, and so if I click through on that one, I'll see here Universal Containers has latitude, longitude type information, as well as here's the clean address I spoke about, the county, and that sort of thing. Okay. Some tips to make things as accurate as possible. Country code mapping. Getting the right country is key. It always sounds easy, but if you're an international company or you work with international data, it can be challenging. And so having the geocoder boil things down to the 2-character country code is key. Geopointe contains mappings from commonly typed in values in a country field to those 2-character items. And so things like, we might see Spain on one record, we might see España on the next. In both cases, we'll translate that to ES, which is Spain's ISO code. We do this for a number of different values that can be typed in. Okay, you can customize your own too. So this is through the Geopointe Setup page. You're able to come over to here, country code mappings, and if you click Edit Mappings, this will bring you to the page that lists everything. Okay, and you could create your own. Right, and so a lot of the ones that are common are already in here, but you could create your own. Say if maybe you're in France and we don't happen to have the French way, the French version of saying Spain, then you might be able to you could put that in here, and then geocoding will be that much more accurate. We have what's called a default country code as well. Every organization has one. It's on the Geopointe Setup page also. So if I come back to the Geopointe Setup page, the main one on the front here, this field here, default country code. What this means is that in the event that there is no country on the data in Salesforce, we'll assume a country. And so a lot of times if you're, maybe you're a Canadian-based company and you don't have to type in Canada on every record because you know that these are Canadian addresses, Geopointe wouldn't know that unless we can specify some default. So you might have CA there for you. And we'll pull that off of what your organization has in the address to default you, but you can always change it. And it's really what we fall back to in the event that we cannot figure out what country an address is. So doing those things with your country information is really key. The next best thing is line 1 of the street address. So a lot of information can get put in that street address field. Things like the building name or the estate name or the attention, accounts payable, that sort of thing. But having the first line of your addresses have the actual street portion of it, the number street value, like 123 Main Street, is the best practice. The geocoding might interpret a line 1 saying attention accounts payable with line 2 saying 123 Main Street. It might interpret just fine, but there's more risk involved. If you can flip those, you will have better quality of geocoding. There is some functionality from Salesforce that helps this whole process too. So there's in the setup area of Salesforce, something called mass update addresses. It's not that advanced of a feature, but one nice thing about it is that it will look at your country values, look at your state and province values, show you what you have typed in, and allow you to do mass updates to those. So maybe there's a whole bunch there where people have misspelled United States. And so you could actually clean that up. Rather than having a mapping in our system that sets that to US, you could clean that up with a couple clicks. This is a common admin thing that Salesforce provides. They have another feature that's newer called state and country pick lists. This is a way to actually have those fields on your addresses be drop-down values as opposed to free text fields. It takes some implementation work to do, but it is a feature that Salesforce has. It's definitely a nice feature for end users to utilize. And so if that's of need, you might want to look into that. There are a bunch of apps out there that help with this whole process too. Ones that we would probably start looking at first, if in our case, or we'd be recommending to our customers to start with, are the ones from Proven Works. There's also a newer one from a company called To a Finish, which are the first 3 ones listed there. If you're going a little bit more high end, companies like Experian or Postcode Anywhere have data as well. These help you, upon address entry, make sure that it's entered in a standard way. It's not necessarily geocoded, but it helps the geocoding process. I already talked about how we link the data together, so I'll skip over that. One important point is we don't update your source data with the clean address information. So we don't want to automatically just overwrite your address data with what the Geocode service has. However, some customers have done that. Maybe it's through a trigger, maybe it's through workflow. They update their source address, say the account address, with what the geocoder sends back. Some customers do that. Better yet, what I'd recommend is perhaps just using formula fields and showing that data on your screen if you want to, and overwrite it selectively. But it is there to be done. The linkages are there in Salesforce to do. The geocoder runs, this is quite important actually, as the user that scheduled it. So whoever clicked that schedule jobs button is how the job is going to run every hour. That's what's going to be last modified by on your records. And it must be a licensed user. If that user loses the licenses, the geocode jobs are going to start failing. That's just a Salesforce thing. We do have a geocode cleanup routine. We often get questions around, what if we mass delete a bunch of accounts? What happens to their geocodes? You can, or we have a routine that runs periodically every week or so, every few days, that will look at all the geocodes and make sure that they're not orphaned, that they relate to relevant data. Things like converted leads, we drop those geocodes because they should have one in their new home. So map objects plus geocoding equals mappable data. So now that I've done what I've done so far, I should be able to come over to the map here. Find my data set. Let's just go with all accounts. Let's just look everywhere and click the search button, and things are mappable. And that's because I've gone through the effort of doing what I've done so far, which is a lot of presentation time, but in terms of clicking in the system was, maybe 2 or 3 minutes. The next thing that I would be doing is getting a bit more of the user-focused things set up. Okay, so I have the major data wiring in place at this point, but now I want to make it's a bit more accessible to the users, not just the map tab. So on the page layout, we can do a number of things. We're going to add a map button. Okay, that's going to allow users to click that button and get to that record's location easily as a starting point. Well, actually, we can put a map on the page if we want to. If we're using Salesforce1 or even just Chatter itself, there are publisher actions for checking in and checking out that can be provided to users. In terms of the search layouts, which are the views in Salesforce, you can add a Map Records button there. This would allow a user to go to any view in Salesforce, which is standard Salesforce functionality, create their view, check off the records they want to map, click a button, and map them. Okay, so let's do those things first. So I'm going to come over to our accounts. And I always like to approach my page layouts from here. And I'm going to edit the page layout, find my buttons. And I can see there's two map buttons here. And we supply two. They both do almost the exact same thing. The first one's the one we recommend. The difference between them is that one will open in a new window. So if I hover over this, I'll see that's called Geopointe Map New Window there. One doesn't. The best user experience we find is just staying within one tab or one window inside the browser. So you just choose the first one. In some cases, like a Service Cloud console or something like that, you want to open it in a new window or tab in your browser. That's what that other button's for. Enough customers ask for it that we supplied the button rather than make them create it. So you add that. Now we want to add in the map as well. Okay, so I'm going to find the Visualforce pages. All right, and again, this part's optional, but I'm going to choose the embedded map for the account. I have a section here already. It's a one column section to put that in. What we recommend is after you put it in, though, hit the properties here and change the height to 300. It's what looks best. Salesforce defaults all these things to 200 for some reason, and so you have to change that if you want it to look as best as possible. Okay. The last thing was, the publisher actions. So under the actions here, this is where I can add more publisher actions. So Salesforce comes with a whole bunch. This is really where Chatter comes into play. But if I want to add the check-in and check-out, I can put those anywhere I want to. So let's just put them right there, check in and check out. We recommend not putting it as the first publisher action. The reason is there's a map on the page, and if you put it as the first one, it automatically loads that, and users might get prompted for asking them for their current location when they visit records and things like that. So we recommend putting that just not first, anywhere after that is the best way to go. So now I would do that for any other layouts I might have, if I have other ones, and then hit save. And so now I'm back at the map page here. I can see that I have the embedded map. I have the map button here. If I were to open the feed, this is where my Salesforce lets me. There we go. This is where my check-in is. This is where my check-out is as well. Okay. And what the map's going to allow me to do is be on this record, click the map button, bring us over to our map page, and just locate me at that record, which is really good for doing something like a nearby search for data. Okay. So the search layouts was the next thing. This is not that required. I guess it depends on your organization. Some companies, users find it really comforting to be in the views of Salesforce because they're very simple little query tools. Others don't really use views. They just go to the map page itself, or just use reports for these kinds of stuff. But you can put them on your views. So if I find the list view item here, under search layouts, I can edit that. That's the map records button. Put it there. You don't have it quite as rich a functionality there, because really what you're doing from a view is you might have the all accounts view here, and you're checking off the exact records you want to do. So really your power here is just say, I want to map these exact records. Click the map records button, and it'll bring you over to Geopointe, mapping those specific records. Okay, so it's an option for you. Salesforce1, let's get that set up. That's Salesforce's mobile offering. It's really nice, and we have a presence inside of there. So if you're using Salesforce1, it's really as simple as just going to the setup area In the same way you would give users tabs, you need to do it for mobile. You just have to do it in a different place. So in the setup area of Salesforce, under mobile administration is mobile navigation. So you click that, the map will be sitting there, slide it over, put it wherever you want. Okay. The way to test that that actually worked, if you're up here in the URL, you can, after salesforce.com, there's just a little trick in general. If you type in the word 1/1.app, that will bring you into the browser version of Salesforce 1. Just a little admin trick for you. And you can test things in this interface without having to open up your device and test it. But over stage left here, I would see the map is now sitting here. So if I click that, it's going to bring me into our mapping screen that's meant for mobile. I have already done the publisher actions. So if I were to, let's just say, map some of this data, and I'm in a record at Salesforce, I'm just doing this really quickly to get myself to an account record. From here, hitting the plus sign, I should see there's check-in, check-out. These are the same chatter actions that we had before. Really, my reason for doing it was to put it in the mobile environment, and that allows users to utilize those two functions. This bottom thing here, click-jack settings, sounds scary, but don't worry about it. It's not. Salesforce is out to protect you. They don't want anything malicious coming into the system. If you find that the mobile page is not working, this is the first thing to check. So it's under Setup and Security Controls, and under Session Settings. There is a preference there where you can set session settings right here. So basically, for Visualforce pages, you need to turn that off. Okay, and that just allows other pages, not just ours, but other pages to run that maybe integrate with other sources of data like Google and things like that. I already demoed this. So we just set up the Salesforce UI. So things are ready to be mapped. Users can map things now. In terms of setting up users, there's a lot here, but it's actually really simple. Most of it boils down to two things, the first two here. And so managed licenses is how you give a user access. Without a license, they cannot see anything to do with Geopointe. We also have a permission set in Salesforce that gives the users all the nitty-gritty field level permissions and such, and page permissions that are important for Geopointe. Both can be set up very easily. So to set up a user, I would be in the setup area of Salesforce like this. I go to my installed packages link. This is where I see everything that I have installed. Okay, and here's Geopointe. Next to Geopointe is the manage licenses link. I can click that. This is where I can remove users. I could add users as well. You can see I'm allowed 5 licenses here. I'm the only one set up. I can click add users, pick off a few that I want to add, and so on. You can create views here. This is a Salesforce screen, but once you do that, you can hit add. Now those people have access to Geopointe. The next thing was a permission set. So if I actually click through on Elliott Executive here and go down to the user detail, I can see the permission set assignment. Okay, and I can see there's already Geopointe-based permissions are here. This is what is needed in order to run Geopointe. Okay, when you first install Geopointe, we're going to set up your users with this permission set. In the event that they become a Geopointe user, you don't have to worry about setting them up individually. If you want to, you can always come here and check. We do have an easy button for this as well. If I come to the Geopointe setup screen, maybe a new user joins my company, we haven't assigned that permission set yet, I can always come here. Along the top here are a few buttons. Set user permissions will kick off a job just to make sure that your users have access to that permission set automatically. On the profiles side of things, we have a document that goes into this in a bit more detail. Really, this is the piece that covers your custom tabs and app access. So do you want them to see Geopointe in the top right? The document goes into detail. The main tab people would need access to is the map tab. Through the install of the app, you have the ability to set up the tabs for people. Otherwise, you can go to the profile and give them access to the tabs they need. Okay. Analytics setup is another animal. So we have an optional feature called analytics, which is set up behind this analytics setup button. We're not going into that today. We actually have a analytics deep dive webinar that talks all about our analytics offering, and a document that goes into that as well. So we won't be getting into that today. What that is it's an optional feature that can be applied to individual Geopointe users to get some richer mapping functionality against big volumes of data in a very rich interactive mapping UI. Okay, so I pretty much demoed user setup already as well. So really, it's just out of everything we've done up to this point, it's maybe 10 minutes worth of clicking around for an admin to do. The extra time to make things mappable is however long the geocoder takes to initially get through your data. So the process of getting the initial setup done is pretty straightforward. But next, I didn't want to just stop there because that's just the basics. I wanted to get into some specific business requirements that you'll probably come across. And this will touch on some other things. So let's look at a few of these. All users should see the account type and industry field when mapping accounts. Okay, this is getting into what we call data sets. And so from the Geopointe Setup tab, I have this list of data sets here. I could configure it this way. Okay, we have an edit page here, and I could configure it. More recently, we've brought all this configuration capability to the map itself. We find it's much easier to do that here. So from the map, I can say accounts all data set here, and these icons will bring me into the setup area for it. So I'll just click the first one. And the setup is in a few different pieces. And the fields is what this requirement was talking about. The requirement said I want to see the type and industry fields whenever I map accounts. So what I can do is click on fields, and I can say add field. Add field, there's account type there. And there is the, what was the other one? Industry field. I can touch these, I can move them around in a different order, maybe move phone to the bottom. Hit save if I want to keep that configuration. Let's test it real quick. So I'm just going to click on accounts. I'm just going to say show me them wherever they are. Click search. I see them. Click a pin. There's the industry and the account type fields now. Now those are there because we just added them. Down in the list, I can see industry. I can see account type. Okay, so we solved that simple requirement. We have a good document that gets into more on data sets and strategy around data sets and things down in that link there. But let's move on because there's some more advanced requirements coming. All right, users want to be able to see hot, warm, and cold leads based on the rating field in red, yellow, and green. We're actually going to do hot, warm, and cold accounts, but in red, yellow, and green respectively. Okay, so what we're going to do now is continue to edit. Okay, I'm just going to click on here. We're going to go to the markers configuration. Our markers configuration has a couple different options here. One is just having a static marker. That's the default. I can click on this marker. I could change the color if I want to. I could give it a symbol. And that's going to set every icon up that returns from this data set up with the same icon. I can also take it another direction, which is the requirement direction. Color by a field. And I'll click to select my field. And we were talking about the account rating, I think. Where is it? Darn it. Okay. Apparently I don't have the account rating field here. I thought I did. So I'm going to use account type. Where I can come in here and I can see I chose the account type, and I'm going to, the system will look at all the unique values from that pick list field in Salesforce and assign colors for them, but I could specify these if I want to. So I'm just going to utilize the requirement and pick 3 of these. I'm going to say I want customers to be in kind of a deep green color, and I want them to have this star, okay? I want prospects to be in kind of an orangey color, sort of, and I want them to have a P for prospect, okay? Even though it's a parking symbol. And ones that don't really have an account type, I'm going to Just kind of give an X to. Okay, I'll save that. So you're saving what these markers look like for every unique value. And now when I map this data, again, I can see that there's a bunch of different pins for different colors. And you can see my customer pins here in the green. If I click the legend at the end here, I can see what the results have as the pins. And that's how you configure things to be differentiated on the map. And I apologize, I didn't have leads set up to do specifically red, yellow, green, but hopefully you get the idea. So we've really solved that business requirement. Okay, so users need an easy way to only map customer accounts. Prospects too, so only map customers or only map prospects. So let's come back here. So now what we can do is do filtering. I'm going to click the settings icon. We've talked about fields, we've talked about markers, we haven't talked about filters yet. I can see my, it's based upon all accounts right now. I could base it on my accounts, but that's not what my requirement is. I want to add in a filter. I'm going to add in a filter for account type equals customer. Okay, and I want to save that. So in this case, I'm going to do a save as, and we'll call this customers. Okay, and I'm going to, I said prospects too, so I'm going to do a prospects1, do a save as, call that one prospects. So now when I come down to my data set list here, I have 3 different data sets. I have one that lets me map all accounts in the system. That's the one that we've been working with so far. But I just created the next 2. One for just customers. So if I choose that, it's going to apply that filter. So now I can see I had colored my customers to have this nice little symbol here, and that's all that's showing up on the map. Likewise, prospects, same deal. I guess there are no prospects. That's why. Testing is important. So I wrote prospects instead of prospect. So you get the idea. And it's that simple to tailor these. These data sets can be assigned to all users or could be assigned to individuals. So the last thing I haven't really shown is this others area. Because I'm an admin, I have the ability to set data set access to all users. If a regular user could go through this exact same process if they wanted to, but if they're not an administrator of Geopointe, they would only have the ability to set it to me, which means they would be saving personal data sets. Okay. And again, here's one of those little help icons. If you have any questions, you can always use this to get more information about what you're seeing here. We are in the process of working on having a sharing link here, so you could have data sets that are unique to groups of people. As of right now, it's all the Geopointe users or just your own. But do note that a data set is not the data itself, it's just the means by which to get the data. So when they actually map things, it's still going to respect all of their Salesforce security settings. You need the ability to export results to a CSV file. And this comes into actions. Normally under actions here, we would have a button that says export to CSV. We don't have that yet. So what I'm going to do is open up a new tab here for Geopointe Setup. Go to actions. There's a bunch here. We have record actions, we have list actions. We want this one here called export CSV. We turn it off by default when you first install so that you have to activate it. So I'm going to just click activate here. And I'm going to refresh the page. I'll just do that search again. And under actions now, I have this export CSV option. So I could click that and be able to export that CSV file. So we solved that requirement too. Actions are pretty useful. We supply you with a bunch of them, and you actually have the ability to create your own. So here's another actions one. Users want to be able to change the ownership of records using the map, but only specific users need this ability. And so if I come back to Geopointe here and look at the actions here, you can see I have one called change owner. I'm going to activate it. So first it's activated. But I need to go to user access because the requirement said only specific users should have this capability. And so now I'm going to click on user access here. It's going to bring us to the sharing screen in Salesforce. And so by default, this action was deactivated, but when I activated it, it's set up so that all internal users can see it. We don't want that. We only want specific people. So first, let's add some specific people. I can do this by public group or role or what have you. And we'll say users think we will anyway. There we go. And let's add Jason and Steve and Sue. Okay. And then I'm going to get rid of all internal users. So now any of those people would have access to change ownership. Actually, let me add myself. Okay. So now I would be able to come to the map page. Perform my query. Okay. And I could actually see the change owner here now. And that's only there because I gave myself access to it. Click change owner, and I'd have the ability to change ownership on those records. Okay. And again, speaking of actions, this is something we'll get into more in the developer webinar that's upcoming. But you have the ability to create your own. If you wanted to create your own feature that allowed you to launch some functionality like this to interact with the mapped data, you could do that. Management wants users to be able to filter by regions. So what we have here is a shape search. Okay, so built into Geopointe is the ability to create shapes. If I go to shape search here, I could draw a shape that maybe outlines this area of the country, or maybe this is what we call a region. I could click on that. I could give it a different color, change the opacity if I want to, and save it. I could also search by it. So let's just call this Northeast region. Okay. So right now what I've done is I've saved the Northeast region. By default, it's saved for just myself. And if I click search here, you'll see we have the ability to search for prospect data again, but just what's inside of this shape. But I want to share this. Okay. In our next release that's coming out in a couple weeks, we're actually going to have a sharing option right here. So you can go to share this unique record. But right now, what you have to do is create a shapes tab in Salesforce. So we save this just as any other data in Salesforce. So you can see there's the Northeast region shape. And if I came here and clicked on sharing, I could share that. You can see right now only I'm the owner of it. But if I clicked add here, I could say all internal users or whoever I want to. And now every user in Geopointe is going to be able to come to Geopointe, and in their saved shapes list, they would, here I have Northeast region, they would have this option as well. And they'd be able to get that, add it to the map, and do things like search inside of it, change ownership, that sort of thing. Okay, it's a shared shape at this point. Users need to be able to see the drought monitor in Geopointe. So this gets into what's called our KML file layer integration. And so that's the URL of the drought monitor here. And this feature allows you as the administrator to create layers that are available for users to click on and add to the map. So under the layers option here, I can say new layer, and let's call this drought monitor DM. Copy the URL in there. I could give it a description if I want to. I could have it auto load if I want to. I don't in this case, and hit save. Now when I come back to the map, as a user, I have the ability to come to the layers option, and I see the drought monitor here, and click add. And that's going to not work because I put the wrong URL in there. All right, we're very short on time, so I'm not actually going to, actually this might work. There we go. So then I'm able to add in the URL of the drought monitor, the real URL, and have it work. So users have the ability to add this externally sourced mappable data onto the map page. And this works with all kinds of data. KML is the file format to be used out there. And we could help you with this feature if you don't totally understand it. We should be supporting another file format called GeoJSON at some point this summer as well. And again, those layers can be something that is only given to specific people. So some other business requirements here. These are things that are coming. Users need the ability to see those colored pins in Salesforce 1. Right now, our Salesforce 1 solution only shows a little red dot for everything you search because we're just keeping it super simple for mobile, not getting into all those color rules and stuff. We're going to change that and bring the coloring to Salesforce 1 as well. So if you wanted to see those prospects in the way you see them, you'd be able to do that. Being able to associate a shape to a record. So this is actually something we're working on now, and it's kind of leading into something bigger we're working on this summer. And it's the ability to essentially treat a shape as a piece of data on a record. So maybe you're in franchising and you want to document for every franchisee what that area of protection is around their franchise so that other franchisees cannot be in that area. That's a way to do that. Or maybe you want to document the range a cell tower has. Maybe it's 50 miles, but you want to be able to visually see that when you click on the record. That's coming in the next release. That's leading into something bigger, which is that third bullet of being able to create territories and have Geopointe automatically assign them. This is something we're working hard on now. It's the ability for you to be able to use common areas like postcodes or counties or phone area codes or time zones and use that as the basis for basically building territories, or even more generically, assigning geographic regions to records. It could be used for all sorts of purposes. And that's something we'll be working on this summer. We do release quite often. We keep the application updated for you, just silently in the background. We do push upgrades and things. We patch you pretty regularly, but nothing that would be significant or get in your way or you wouldn't notice. We're just doing bug fixes here and there. More formally, we have an 8 to 9 week release cycle. And so about 10 days prior to that, which should be a few days from now, you'll be getting an email that specifies what's coming in the next release and what the schedule is. And usually a week before we push it out to you, your sandboxes will be upgraded if you have one. A few midweek that following week, we'll put it on AppExchange. That gives you the opportunity to get your data or get your system updated with the latest release. If you haven't done that, we'll update everybody that following Saturday evening. And we'll hold a release webinar as well that will educate you on what's in that release, okay, if you haven't been already through the communications we've done. And we may differ the process a little bit depending upon the user experience impact of things. So more recently, we've done pretty significant UI change. In that case, we were a little bit more proactive in our communications earlier. So we reserve the right to communicate a little bit extra in some cases, or give you a chance to see things for a little bit longer in a sandbox before we put it in production. So some additional features, and we're going to get into these really in the developer webinar, but just to give you a sense of things, we have some hooks into Apex and Visualforce, buttons that can launch things, code you can write and perform Geopointe searches inside of your code, or through the URL being able to pass across filters and things like that. We have documentation out there for it. The developer webinar we're going to be working on next month is going to go into a deep dive on that topic. This is just a list of some of the objects that come with Geopointe, more for your reference when we send this information out. And this is our contact information. So, please follow us on social media. You're already on our email list. Email us your questions, that sort of thing. We're happy to help and happy to tailor this webinar or create new webinars that give you more information for what you're looking for. We definitely want this to be something that's educating you and not just us advertising anything. So, definitely let us know if this was useful, what you'd like to see in future webinars and that sort of thing. So this webinar has a lot of content in it, and I'm already up against the hour. And so if there are any questions, please post them in there now if you have time to continue and stay on. If not, you'll definitely get a recording of this webinar as well as the presentation materials. So I'll just give another second for questions to come in. So it looks like I was very thorough in what I was speaking about. So I actually don't see any questions. I tried to answer the questions that came up the last time we did this webinar in the materials already. So, all right, well, we are 2 minutes over. So I'm going to wrap up the webinar now, and thank you for attending. And like I said, you'll get the follow-up materials in an email later today. Thanks, everyone. Bye.